The call to order for the regular city council meeting, roll call.
Clerk,
Here.
Holmberg,
Here.
Lund,
Here.
Kushner,
Here.
Jacobs.
Here. Approval of city council minutes. This is for 10/12 and 10/19.
Clerk,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. Adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt.
Clerk,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right, first reading on the ordinances. An ordinance authorizing the city manager and city clerk to execute contracts with civic organizations for fiscal year 2021 annual services. 8 contracts.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is the contracts for the civic organizations as approved by budget. It's an annual operation that we do to encourage our partnerships with our civic organizations. The impact to the budget is the $118,900 in total between the 8 contracts. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any specific questions on the budget. I would like to discuss a little bit like on Warrensburg Center. I'm sorry, Warrensburg Main Street. I am their ex-CEO and I talked to Jill quite a bit, and I hope she can chime in on Zoom if I get anything incorrect. I don't want to change the contract specifically, but I would like to look at a working group where they're experiencing some issues with specifically like Dickens Christmas and getting some vendors. The music through the summer. I've been there and I think some other folks have. It's not as attended as I'd like to see as a city council, the investment. So I'm thinking we put together a kind of a working group or task force, something that and I'll certainly participate, talk through that. What does the community, what do they think they might want? And we can come back in and either, I don't want to change the contract tonight, personally. We could amend it for the summer or next year going into it, we could give better feel for how we can get more people engaged. Because I do hear some folks say that they're not as excited with what we're doing, but they don't have a real good answer for it. So I don't know if we're going to do it, but I'd like to put in the effort and I'd be willing to participate and lead that. So does Jill have any comments?
Jill is on. Jill, you are unmuted.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize for not being able to be there in person. I really kind of, like Scott said, just wanted some feedback on what council was thinking. We did propose some changes to the wording of our contract this year, and the changes were declined. It came back to us pretty much the way it has been for the past several years. So I was really just looking for some feedback on why that was. I don't know if you guys remember when I presented to you back in the summer, that part of the reason that we asked for those changes was that we could have more flexibility when we're planning our events, so that we don't have to come back to you every time to say, look, Dickens isn't going to work out this year. Some of the reasons Dickens may have to go away eventually is a lot of those artisans that we use are obviously artisans that we try to find that do things during Dickens time period. And as we all know, those are dying arts, woodworking, crocheting, knitting, some of that stuff is dying arts. So every year it's harder and harder for us to find artisans. And like I said in the summer, it's not that we want to get rid of Dickens or that we want to never have a Christmas event. We won't have a Christmas event. It's just, it may not be called Dickens. So my reason was so that we wouldn't have to come back to you guys and say, hey, it's not going to work out for Dickens this year. We can't get enough artists. Can we amend our contract? If we get more flexibility from the get-go to say, yes, you have to do a Christmas event. Yes, you have to do a fall festival. Yes, you have to do family-friendly artisan type events. That gives us more flexibility when we plan to still have events, have engaging events in the community, but yet maybe not be stuck to those types of names that are in our contract.
Okay. I think everybody's happy with what is in the contract at the moment. I mean, certainly we could have a discussion going forward to future years.
I think my personal advice is, so understanding the history of this is, there was a time period when some of those events went away, right? So, for example, Birdfest. And then there was public interest renewed about bringing that back. I think it was at that time that the council and Main Street entered into a relationship. And I wasn't here for this, so I'm going off of what I understand from having conversations with previous directors and staff and council members and everything else, is there was interest in doing that again. Main Street didn't have the staff or resources to commit to the time and resources it takes to put on an event like a Birdfest. And so the city and Main Street partnered to create the events coordinator position. There were specific events that were outlined for Main Street to do that correlated with that events coordinator position, which then justified the investment the city was making to Main Street to support that position. And over time, and I agree that over time, this is going to adapt and change. But my recommendation is that's done on a case-by-case basis, and you amend the contract every time that needs to change, versus just putting in very broad language in there that makes it very difficult to tie down what the accountability is back for that investment. And that's why I think that, at least from my standpoint, that language was not encouraged and changed this year, is because the changes were so broad in scope that there really wasn't. And ultimately, what we were doing is we were giving an additional stipend to Main Street to support a staff position. And it wasn't tied to events coordinator position. It wasn't tied to events, which is kind of the what created that whole relationship in the first place. I do agree with Jill that, you know, as it becomes more difficult for those artisans and those types of things to be there, you may have to adapt that to different types of community events during those time periods. But I think there still needs to be some specificity within the contract itself that outlines that relationship and what's expected in return for that investment of taxpayer dollars to that organization. And ultimately, I mean, I guess the council can make that more generic if you like. Maybe that specificity isn't needed anymore. But if that's the case, then I would include that money into. So in the contract, there's a couple different pots of money, right? There's a pot of money that we give to them for general operation to support their efforts as Main Street as an organization, remain certified as a Main Street organization within the state. That's where we give that general pot of money, right? That they can use for their administration, support their staff, pay bills, those types of things. There's another pot of money that's designated for the events coordinator position specifically, and with that is tied specific community events that previous councils had identified as being of importance to our community, and Main Street was willing to administer those events for us. And then the third pot of money was money supporting specifically the Birdfest event. So if council wants, I mean, you can generalize the contract and lump all that into one, but when you do that, you lose some of the accountability there when you do that. And so that was kind of the thought process. There was concern that with the requests that were made and the changes of the contract this year, it was making it more general, and you lose a lot of that accountability by the city for those events and those types of things. So I think the city is willing to be adaptable through that and understand that those events will probably change either in title or in scope. But I think your contract needs to grow with that. I wouldn't recommend just putting generic language into a contract that it can be whatever whoever wants to interpret to be, because then the city has no accountability to it anymore.
Am I thinking of it correctly? Because the way I understood it is we're effectively contracting these services out to Main Street so that the city staff doesn't have to mess with it.
Correct.
So would it be fair to say that if we were doing a contract for any other service, we would be explicit in what our expectations and what we expected to get in return?
That's what we've tried to gravitate to over the last several years with all of these contracts.
Yeah, so I think that's really a really concise answer is they're providing a service, and in order to be good stewards of the funds that we are entrusted with, we need to be specific in our expectations or at least as specific as possible.
Yeah, and we've adapted it over the last couple of years. I mean, we used to have the summer concert series in there, and there was required to be, I think, 5 summer concerts tied to that funding. And last year they came and requested more adaptability on that there wasn't support for that. And maybe there's only demand for 1 concert. And so we did make that change in the contract. The way that language is in there, that's just a summer concert now. It's not a summer concert series at this point. And again, I think that's the way I would recommend the council and the city handle it, is you make sure it comes and makes that request for that upcoming year and how they'd like to change that. Council either agrees to it or not, and what you agree to, you put in the contract.
Because we redo this every year, right?
Yeah, it's approved every year.
So
I think that what Scott has proposed is going to be a great solution to this problem here. It's just going to force us to, work, a year ahead of time.
Yeah.
Which is good. But maybe we got to do a little bit of catching up this year and may need to amend things, midstream, but we can always do that after that group gets together and has specific recommendations to either adapt to COVID or adapt to changing needs of the city in the future.
And I agree with being specific in the contract. Where I really wrestled with this was what we're asking for. I don't know if they're effective. And so how do we put in some work with them and say, maybe it's not a music series anymore. Maybe it's a, I don't know, car show or just something that generates that interest we want as council. I desperately want it because I go to all of them, but they're not being well attended, and we need to, I guess I'd like to see more. So thanks, Casey, for articulating well.
Have we are speaking of being specific and measurables, do we quantify what kind of attendance we want to have at these events?
We haven't. No.
Because I was the Burnt Fest last year. They were putting in the dunk tank.
It wasn't dunk tank, it was your burnt, that's just.
Okay, yeah. So I thought there was a ton of people out for that particular event, but that could also be my bias because I was in a high traffic area. So, and I don't know if we have what metric we could use to effectively measure that, because obviously people come and go and there's a lot of entrances and exits from downtown. So it's not like we have a gate that we could, I guess we could look at sales tax collected as a measure of how many.
We've got that. Last year's Bird Fest was, in my opinion, better than the one prior, the year prior. But I hear from several citizens I've heard over the years, and I ran out and asked folks this time, they want more kid friendly.
Right.
But we need to define that. Telling Main Street, well, we just want you to make more kid friendly. I'd like to put in a little bit of work over the next few weeks or months to say, what's that look for? And really gear it up for this summer. If we want to do something different, we can come back and amend it. So the specificity, I agree with. I just want to do more work to tell Main Street, this is our expectation.
Yeah.
Try some different things, because I think we could do better, but we need to help them.
Right, I got you.
So.
All right.
Jill, did you have anything else to add?
No, I don't. I'll get the contract signed then and look forward to being able to sit down, you guys, and kind of discuss.
Okay.
We lost it there.
All right. Second reading ordinances. A second reading on ordinance enlarging a light industrial district by rezoning land located at the southwest corner of Warren and Pine Street from high industrial district to light industrial district.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, this is the ordinance and public hearing that you held last 2 weeks ago regarding the rezoning of the property for the Evergy project. This would take it from heavy industrial to light industrial. Staff has not had any additional public inquiries in the last 2 weeks. We would recommend approval.
Move to approve.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kirchner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right, second reading on an ordinance authorizing the city manager and city clerk to execute a contract with Davis Structure and Development Corporation for the East Wastewater Treatment Plant UV upgrade project in the city of Warrensburg, Missouri.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, this is the second reading of an ordinance. We did a bid. We went with the best and lowest bid. That was with Mr. Davis, and Mr. Davis also did the plant, the upgrade out the west plant. So there's no additional information.
Move to approve.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kirchner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right. A second reading ordinance authorizing the city manager and city clerk to execute an extension of the depository contract and pledge agreement with Equity Bank for a period of 2 years.
So this was the contract that was presented 2 weeks ago for the banking services to run 2 more years, and then we'll go back out for bid for banking services in 2022.
Move to approve.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kirchner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. A second reading on an ordinance adopting Article 3 of Chapter 28 related to the use of marijuana in public places.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is the second reading of the ordinance prohibiting marijuana consumption in public places. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Move to approve.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kirchner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. Other businesses. All right. A resolution of the city of Warrensburg, Missouri, supporting and encouraging the efforts of MCC Development of Wisconsin LLC to develop 48 units of senior affordable housing on Lot 6 Hawthorne Development.
So we're reaching that time of year where any developers interested in doing any type of tax credit projects, which requires an application to the Missouri MIHTC. I'm drawing a blank on the acronym right now, but Housing Development Corporation for Missouri. Anyway, so they're getting ready to put those applications in. It's a very competitive process. There's a couple different buckets, and actually you have 2. The next agenda item will be on this same issue. A difference being is that one is for senior housing, and the other one is for multifamily housing. So they're in the process of getting these done, and given that it's competitive, it's always good that there's support from the city. So the resolution helps do that, and then we have some letters of support that we provide as well. That helps strengthen their application, hoping that they get awarded over some of the other applications throughout the state. So this developer has actually done a couple different applications on the same site previously, although the first couple times it was a multifamily housing project, and they were not successful in getting that awarded. So they're changing tactics this time and doing it as a senior housing project, hoping that the senior housing pool pool of money is not as competitive as the multifamily. So they're hoping that by switching it to senior housing, which is sorely needed within our community, that they may have some more success with that application process. So staff would recommend approval.
Any motion?
Mhm.
Move to approve.
Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kittner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
A resolution of the city of Warrensburg, Missouri, supporting and encouraging the efforts by HRM Services by redeveloping 52 units of family affordable housing to be known as Spring Ridge Highlands.
Mayor and City Council, this is an application that is the second phase essentially of a project that they started with an application last year. It's located on West Clark, in what we know as the Warrensburg Heights and Warrensburg Properties area. This would be for 52 units to rehabilitate existing structures under the multifamily program Harold just spoke of. The applicant, Pete Ramsell, is there in the room this evening if you have questions of him.
Mr. Angela, if you don't mind, I asked this last year. I was newer on council. I've had a whole other year to grow. One of the things that I'm interested in is that particular development right now is fairly run down, et cetera. How do we work to maintain it? Because last year when I went over and looked at it before the first resolution, I was kind of shocked. And then Chief called it a den of iniquity. So, yes, well, I try to earn that dollar a year by paying things. Anyway, I'm joking, but I apologize for joking, but lighthearted guy. How do we keep it well?
Help us get this second phase funded. The first phase got approved last year, and I was hoping to stand before you and tell you that we actually closed on it. We're still waiting on rural development. They're part of the review. We were wanting to close in the summer. We'll close this year. And I can't stand here tonight and tell you it'd be November. I imagine it's going to be at the very end of the year. May I pass something out to help me speak? And I give Barb the credit for this. Barb, she can hear me. I don't know how many times I've used this aerial that you did for us a year or so ago. Okay, great. Now this one's a little different than I'm handing out. Barb in the packet showed the phase 1 and the phase 2. But this really shows you basically the properties that were there. And I'm sorry. Going back to people and I hate that. What we had basically is we had a developer who developed over time all of the properties you see on that site plan. And it went by Warrensburg Estates, which originally was a senior project. And you can see that on the sheet that I just passed out. Then there was the Spring Ridge properties. And we combined the Spring Ridge properties in Warrensburg Estate into what we're calling what Barb has on her sheet, which is Spring Ridge Highlands. Or no? Thank you. You're absolutely right. This next phase will be the next two properties, the Warrensburg properties and the Warrensburg Estates. It does absolutely, I'm just being blunt and honest, okay? It does absolutely no good to do this first phase without doing the second. And what you saw, we've been observing for well over a year, convincing rural development that they had a problem, somebody needed to do something about it. And without getting myself in trouble, I'll be kind to the existing ownership and the existing developer. I've never seen a property in that shape. I mean, there's no excuse for it. It's horrible. It's an eyesore. It's a den of whatever you want to describe. Yes, it is.
Yes.
It's sinful the way those children who tried to stay there, the environment that they had to live in. We are going to clean it up. And with your help, we'll clean up the entire area because it's not a one-stop shop. I mean, if we just do this portion that we're talking about, for lack of a better term, I'll call it phase 1, you still got issues in what I'm going to call phase 2. This needs to be cleaned up, and we're just asking for your support so we can clean it up. It's a beautiful area of town, beautiful residential areas all around it. I've never been to the property when I didn't see something that you've seen over and over, and you've been, people reported to you over and over. I never get on the property that some neighbor doesn't come and say, well, when are you going to do something with this? It's just a nightmare for tenants, for the city, for the neighborhood, and we are committed to cleaning it up. We will basically run it with one property management, so one entity will have control of all of it. I'm sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, that's right. I was gonna, Councilmember Holmberg, to answer your question. So I've helped cities participate in this process in 2 different states now, and this is tied to federal tax credits. So the federal tax credits, they're distributed through the states, through these housing commissions. There are federal requirements tied to it, which includes monitoring typically for 30 years in order to qualify and receive the full benefit of those tax credits, which requires inspections and those types of things. Some can be scheduled, some of them are impromptu, so the developer can't just go fix it all up right before an inspection and those types of things. And they are required to monitor those things. And to be honest with you, in these programs, because they're highly competitive, typically developers that don't do a good job usually earn a reputation and they don't get awarded tax credit projects in the future. So you've got to be a developer who's very good at not just building it, but maintaining it for that 30-year period, because the commissions don't want to jeopardize awarding these credits to someone that isn't going to take care of it when they could award it to another project that would have the desired effect.
So this time it's different in the sense that, because if all that was in place for the first development, I don't know.
Well, from the beginning, I've never quite understood how this project got to that state. Because there should have been.
We've never seen anything this bad.
There should have been state oversight over that. So I don't know if it hit the 30-year period, because after the 30-year period, they're not required to monitor it. So I don't know if it's older than 30 years and the state quit monitoring it, or if the state just got overwhelmed and didn't have the staff resources to go out and monitor like they're supposed to. But somehow this one fell between the cracks. So, and I think part of that is good, because I think that the State Housing Commission is just as interested in fixing this and getting it right for Warrensburg. And so maybe we have a little bit of a competitive edge in this application process, because they want to fix it and get it right. So, but to answer your question, it never should have gotten to that point. There are safeguards in place through the federal and state program. They're supposed to keep that from happening.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate the education. I guess the best wishes on it. I certainly want to see it improve.
I'm just going to throw out a ballpark figure so you get the idea of the extent of rehab. We'll be spending approximately $60,000 a unit on rehabbing it, and I guarantee you it needs every dime of that. Every time I go back over there, I see a greater need. So we just need to get started on it, and we need to get the second phase funded as well.
You mean 60,000 per building?
No, I mean per unit.
Per unit?
Yes, sir.
They're bad.
They pretty much have to be gutted down into skeletons and built back up.
We're taking 2 buildings completely out of, so you'll have fewer units over there as well. We're building a brand new community building that will serve the entire property. We will have a service coordinator on the project, as well as a manager and a maintenance person. We're going to do it right.
Yes, my question would be, is that you stated earlier that it doesn't make sense doing the first phase, which was approved last year, without doing this piece. So what's the backup plan if your application this year doesn't get approved, but you still have last year's approved?
We're doing something kind of stupid from a business perspective. We're actually going to take over all of it. When we start the rehab and the ownership of the first phase that Barbara has indicated there, we will actually take over. We're taking the position of the general partner in a partnership that owns those last few properties, actually 2 properties. Warrensburg Estates Warrensburg Properties and the other one right there. So we will actually have control of it, and we will be managing all of it. And the current company will be out of the picture entirely. I say it's stupid because if we don't get funded, it's our baby, and we're going to have to take care of it for, we'll keep trying to get it funded. I mean, we have to. The answer is it gets funded, whether it gets funded this year or next year or the following year, it's going to be our baby to carry it.
So how do you maintain compliance with what was awarded last year? Because there's usually timelines on when you've got to complete those projects, right?
Absolutely. We're waiting on MHDC and RD. They know that. MHDC has been ready to close it for a couple months. It's rural development. And again, because we're being monitored and listened to, and this is going out over the airways, I've got to be careful what I say.
Sure.
But I can harp on a lot of things that aren't right. And they're supporting it. Eventually, we'll get it done.
Thank you for taking time to expand.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Motion? Yeah, I make the motion with her.
Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Bittner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. Appearance of the council is not listed on the agenda.
I don't think we have anything there. Anything on Zoom?
No one has raised their hand.
No.
All right. I don't have any mayoral appointments. Miscellaneous matters from the mayor and our city council. All right. So I'm going to read this statement here. Recently, the city of Warrensburg was requested by Johnson County Community Health Services to approve an endorsement of a recent mask mandate issued by their board. The city recognizes the Johnson County Community Health Service has the authority through state law to issue the mandate to protect public health during the pandemic, with or without the endorsement of our other local political entities. The city and its officials will enforce the mandate as it would any other state law in effect at this time and as directed by Johnson County Community Health Service. The city council interprets this request as political actions rather than an administrative action, giving the mandate is in effect regardless of any endorsement for this body or is concerned about the effects of taking such action. As such, the city will abide by and enforce the mandate, but will not take any action to endorse as requested. All right. That's all I got. Anything? Anything down that way?
I got one thing. So the Warrensburg Chamber has agreed to host the Coffee with Council, and we're suggesting on the second Saturday every other month starting in January. So that would be, next one would be January up. So we've got time to plan who wants to go. Talked with Suzanne Taylor. She was gracious enough to host the first one. We'll do the rest. And so I'd like for us to get that initiative going. So just info back.
Well, I mean, the Jack Moore room or?
It will be. It worked out. When Noah and I did it, the space worked out well for COVID. And of course, Suzanne's always a great host. Love our chamber folks and stuff. So it meets their mission and ours. So
Okay. I like it. All right. City manager report.
Just one thing real quick. So recently during my monthly radio interview, with a local radio station, the topic regarding the animal shelter came up. And during that interview, I did state that there would be an item on the agenda tonight that we've been anticipating. And the plan was to have council take action on potentially approving an agreement. That was not on the agenda this evening. That was due to a request of the Warrensburg Animal Rescue Group, wanting some more time to review that agreement with their attorney. And that's why it's not on the agenda tonight. So since that was talked about publicly on the radio, I did at least want to address that tonight, that we are still working on that. We are hoping to announce that sometime soon as they're comfortable with the agreement and ready to move forward. And hopefully maybe that'll be on the next council meeting agenda. We'll see. But we're kind of waiting on the go ahead from them that they're ready to proceed. So I don't have anything else. Everything else is reported in the city manager report. And then we'll have a brief item that we'll need to take care of in closed session after this meeting.
I think everyone noticed that we got our first winter weather on October 26th this year.
More snows.
Yes, it was a good opportunity. We did lose a lot of experience this year with retirements in the Public Works Department. So we do have, the crew is doing new routes this year. So it was a good opportunity for us to get out, experience our new routes and drive them without having 12 inches of snow on the ground already. So before we left shift today, we did do another round of salt and sand on the streets. So hoping that we'll be able to keep the ice off the roads, but looking forward to my first snow season as a public works director, but we have a lot of good guys out there, so.
Finance report?
The only thing I would like to add is I received the email confirmation on our reimbursement for the CARES Act funding. So that check will be ready on Friday. So I will go to the treasurer's office and pick that up Friday afternoon. So it's $226,000 and some change.
Sure, we can find a good use for it.
I think so.
It's already spoken for.
It's already been spent.
Right.
That's the reimbursement for spent that one.
Yeah. Anything, Chief?
A few things. First of all, next Tuesday is kind of a big day in our country, and there's a lot going on. It's election day, so I want to let everyone know. Doug Harris and I met today with my investigations lieutenant and his staff, just to make sure all of us are aware of the election laws, rules, all that kind of stuff. And so there will be a presence not at the polling places, but just out and about of officers. And we met with Diane Thompson as well, so we kind of know what our ground rules are. Secondly, some sad news. I was informed today that my assistant, Wanda Anderson, who's been battling cancer for more than a year, is going to be retiring. It's very difficult for me to inform you all of this. It was a hard decision on her part, but she's at the point where her health is in jeopardy, and she just doesn't feel like she can come back to work. And, it's been rough. We've been watching her for the last year. She's been on unpaid leave for a while, and she's a fighter, but she's been here since she was 18 years old. She graduated from high school. A lot of you probably don't know that about her. 42 years with the city. She served many different chiefs, and I will miss her greatly. Her presence has been missed all these months, and I'll be asking for a resolution from you all for her on her retirement and wishing her well. So I want to bring that news to you. Thank you.
Cindy? No? Closed session, if somebody wants to read that.
I guess it's my turn. I'll muddle through it. Vote to close part of this meeting pursuant to section 610.021 of the revised statutes of Missouri relating to legal actions, cause of action, or litigation involving the city and any confidential or privileged communication between the city and its representatives and its attorneys. 2, leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate where public knowledge might adversely affect the amount paid in the transaction. 3, hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting a particular employee by a governmental body when personal information about the employee is discussed or recorded. 12, documents or any documents related to a negotiated contract until a contract is executed or all proposals are rejected. 13, individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment.
Brooks,
Yes.
Conrad,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
That one was fun.